Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hyperconscious Podcast. Alan, what is hyperconscious?
Once you understand why something is the way that it is, now you have the power to change it. Great conversations with great people and great questions are the keys to the kingdom of unlocking your consciousness.
Every single action that you do starts as a thought. When you control the way you think, you will control the way you act, and you will control the way you live. That is hyperconscious. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hyperconscious Podcast is proudly sponsored by our friend and mentor, David Meltzer of the Playbook Podcast. He was kind enough to join us on episode 144 and 135.
Folks, it has become Kevin and I's mission in life to help you realize that the life of your dreams is right on the other side of you becoming the greatest version of yourself. Let us help you do that.
I rarely do these things twice in such a short amount of time, but you guys impress me. I believe in people that provide value and of our service. You two guys are on your way to huge fulfillment, purpose, and profitability, and I look forward to helping you both.
We appreciate that more than you know. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyperconscious Podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, you will see that yet again, for maybe the fifth or sixth week in a row, we are in a different setting. If you're listening to us, you will not know what I'm talking about, so watch us on YouTube as well. We are sitting down with Kim and Spike Spencer. We have been lucky enough to sit down with both of you separately in the past, but since we're in California together, we figured we'd jump on the mics with you guys and talk about relationships and whatever comes up. How are you doing on this beautiful Sunday?
Extraordinary.
Yes, extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
Can you just go a little bit closer to the mic, Spike?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got to get right up
You know, I
on
do
that
this
thing.
for a living.
So just for the listeners who haven't heard you guys separately, and I suggest you go back and listen to their episodes because they both have very powerful stories that we won't necessarily get into today because we're short on time. But what is it that you both do, and why are we here today, basically?
We're here today because you absolutely love us, or else we wouldn't be on a mastermind
We
call
are
every other
adored by
every other
you
week.
guys.
That's a fact. That is true. These are
So
all true
I am
statements.
Kimberly. I am a certified high performance coach. I am the CEO and founder of crownyourself.com. I help high achievers build their empires and reign holistically in their bodies, businesses, and relationships so that your success is not at the expense of the other thing of your body or of your business. And I help them just tap into their full potential. You just got to tap that full potential.
Tap
Tap
it in.
it, baby.
Tap it. Potential. Tap it.
Tap it.
I am Spike Spencer, and I wear many hats. I am a voiceover artist. I've been doing that for 30 years in anime, video games, etc. I'm a real
But
estate
you look
investor.
so young.
I know. I'm a real estate investor, and I am also a coach in relationship sales dynamics, the combination of dating and relationship trainings and business trainings as well. So I teach that as well.
Beautiful. So we learned a lot at the Influencer Academy about systems. A lot of, like, if you want to be successful, you have to have a system in place that you can follow so it's repeatable and predictable. What do you have for a system when it comes to a successful relationship? Because you're both very high achievers, entrepreneurs, so I'm sure at times that can get difficult. And for those listening, like, what are some actionable steps that, I'm just going to hammer right into it in the
Just-
first
yeah.
question.
Yeah, well done. Just like dive in. Let's do it.
I've been thinking about
It's been
that.
a great.
Yeah, right.
I think one of the biggest systems that we have is and we've had this since the beginning of our relationship, we have couch time. I mean, we have time that we come together, and what that is time that we come together as a couple pretty much every night and discuss over a cup of tea or a glass of wine. Most often it's a glass of wine, and we just have a discussion about our days, and we get to connect on that level. And it's it actually is a box that I tick on my personal success daily habits of I need to spend not only 30 minutes to an hour of time with my son, but I also need to spend time with Spike, and we need to have that connected time on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's more difficult with a baby now. Before it was a pretty specific time every day. Now we kind of have to go with the flow a little bit, depending on our life situation, like all the travel, etc. But having about 20 minutes in a relationship, and I believe it's John Gray had mentioned this in Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, is that it is very, very powerful to have the woman will unload, basically, emotionally for about 20 minutes at the end of the day. Guys tend to go in there like a man cave and go watch TV, et cetera, et cetera. But so I always teach guys to, look, you need that couch time. It's very, very important. And you need to shut the hell up and just listen to what she's saying.
Right.
You don't strap on your tool belt and try to fix things. It's very, very important. That is
We're big girls.
system.
We can fix it ourselves.
Yep.
So like that's
they
what
are fixing it themselves.
and we are
by
fixing
saying
it
Right. Saying
by
it.
talking it out. And because Spike and I are both coaches, we both know sometimes when to lean in to asking some more questions around it. And I mean, for me, it's been more of a struggle personally to not strap on my own tool belt and coach him out of it.
Right.
Because that's what I do. And yeah,
that is true.
Spike lit right up. Oh yeah.
How do you practice vulnerability? So that's something we learned a lot about, and that's something I've been really trying to focus on in my relationship and in life in general. And I think Alan and I have a different thing. In the microphone, it's easier. We have more practice when it comes to being vulnerable. But in your personal life, it's totally different when somebody's looking at you. So how do you go about practicing vulnerability, and do you have any examples, concrete examples of how you've been vulnerable with one another?
Yeah, from the beginning of our relationship, the day that I met Spike was the day that I literally said a prayer to the universe. I was like, God, all I want to do is just be me. I just want to be 100% authentic. I just want to be me. And then this guy comes up and picks me up at a networking event, and I'm intrigued.
Right.
I was not expecting this. And I was like, okay, then this is my shot to be 100% authentically me. I shared with him things that are taboo that you probably wouldn't want to share with somebody on first meeting them, especially if you were interested. I shared about how I had previously been married and pulled a Britney when I was 22 and ran off and eloped with a Navy man. I shared about my dislike for 80s pop music, which really was a crush on him. I shared so much, and I just was like, okay, let's play. Let's be 100% authentic, candid, honest with what I like, what I don't like. And he respected that so much, because candor is not just the things that you say, it's also the things that you withhold.
Right.
And we stopped withholding things from each other. That was just a blatant rule.
Right.
And we've had some more challenging conversations. I remember about a year into our marriage, I was there was just some issues with the polarity. Why? Because I was in a painting class, and I found myself really attracted to the painting teacher. And I came home that night, and instead of suppressing the shame of oh my gosh, do I love my husband? Am I what's going on? What's up with this?
Right.
Instead of repressing that, I said, okay, Spike, I noticed that I had this attraction toward the painting instructor. I said, that means that there's something off in the polarity of our relationship. Let's figure out what this is.
Wow.
And what had happened, and that was a very hard conversation, because I didn't want, because of Spike's past experience, that if you go back and listen to his episode, you'll hear about his story about how his ex-wife cheated on him and all that stuff. And so I never wanted that to be a thing. And so I was very candid with that experience and saying, this is how I felt. Let's explore this. And what we discovered was we had gotten into a pattern that was very typical of married couples. Of Spike had gone into full blown provider mode, but there was no
Right.
the je ne sais quoi. That's the wappa wappa.
The brown chicken, brown cow. A little bit of that there. Yeah.
That's the
So-
first time I've ever heard it that way. It's usually brown chicken, wow wow. You said brown chicken, brown
chicken,
cow.
brown
Brown
cow.
chicken, brown
That's
cow.
that's hilarious.
That had actually, like, he had gone, and this is very typical of men. They go into full provider mode of like, you are my lady. I'm gonna provide for you.
Right.
And we had to have a discussion of like, how do we bring back that sexiness, that spark, that je ne sais quoi. So, yeah.
Well, and being open and honest about this is incredibly powerful for relationships, because if you're not open and honest, then whatever is not being discussed is
Right.
going to start digging and digging and digging, and it's going to come out down the road, and it's going to be a sledgehammer.
Right.
Which happened in my first relationship. My first marriage, I thought things were going really, really well, but they weren't, and I wasn't making the small course corrections.
Right.
And if you don't make the small course corrections, it's just going to be harder and harder. That little bit of trickle becomes a river, and when that river is going, it's very hard to cross down the road. And that's why a lot of people get divorced down the road, because they're not communicating.
Right.
It's like, I think it's called Chinese water torture. With like
The
the
drip,
single
drip.
the
Yeah.
drips, but those drips add up after time,
Right.
and they can cause severe damage later on. And so we just have always in our relationship approached it with a level of candor and trust and safety of like, anything can be discussed. When I was struggling with after giving birth, that was one of the more challenging times as well in our relationship, as happens very commonly, both with getting married and with having a child. A lot of times you'll repeat the programming and the conditioning of what you grew up with. And
Yeah.
Spike grew up with a different set of circumstances than I did, and I grew up with a different set of circumstances than he did. And you'll repeat commonly the patterns that you saw your parents do. And so what I saw was I was stuck in this story of, I'm struggling, I'm doing this, like, am making this money, and like, and I'm raising a baby, and I was like, and I was not feeling supported. Well, the problem was I wasn't asking for the support that I needed.
Right.
And Spike is the most supportive person there. So as soon as I need support, I just have to ask, because he cannot read my mind.
Right.
Yes, and this is a note for all the ladies out there.
Like,
We don't know what you're thinking.
Right.
We really don't.
And if you think that he should know what I'm thinking, like, he won't.
I know.
He
won't-
wants to.
He
Yeah,
wants to.
right.
He actually wants to. Like, I know Spike loves to please me in many ways.
Yeah.
Spike is flexing for
For
those who
those
can't
who-
see it.
Thank you
Right.
very much.
But he wants to please me, and that's why this past weekend, while we were at Influencer,
Right.
he was watching Declan, and he did that to support me in growing my business and in growing my relationships.
Well, and it happens in the any day when we're working. It's like, she's like, I need 2 hours. I'm like, you got it. You know, it was a thing where she was afraid to ask me for the longest time.
Right.
It's, you have to be open to each other, and you have to have those conversations that can be difficult, but they're really so much simpler if you deal with it when it's a teeny tiny little issue.
Exactly.
If you let it go and you go, well, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to say anything, and this goes on for years.
Yeah.
And then you start to say something, and it's like, well, why didn't you tell me? Rah, rah, and then it just goes boom. And that's when everything just messes up. If you're a little bit here at a time, a little bit, you say this one little thing that's a little off. You know, that's, I need this. You need to say what you need. Because, again, she can't read my mind either.
Right.
So radical honesty. We'll tell each other, hey, I don't like this. And, and try to couch it in a way that you say, well, I feel this way.
Or I think this.
I think this
or
way.
I believe, or when you act like this, it makes me feel this way. Because nobody can argue with what you think, what you feel, and what you believe.
Right.
So framing it in that form of communication, when you say I think, or I feel, or I believe, nobody can argue against that. But if you state it as like, you do this.
Right, it's not an attack when it's
then that
framed-
suddenly becomes this attack
Right.
point. Exactly. And then that's where you get a lot of conflict. But when you speak with inarguable truths of I think, I feel, I believe, you can't argue against that. And then that opens up the dialogue for, well, this is what I think, this is what I feel. Now let's find how we can create a win-win out of this.
Right.
And this way of talking and conversation and communication is a work in progress
Always.
for everybody.
Always.
Because you're
Always.
feeling whatever you're feeling, and when you're emoting, you may not say things correctly.
Right.
And then when you're in love with a coach who's really, really good, and you say something, and she will let you know you just said exactly this word, and I'm like, I don't even remember, but I love you anyway. Sorry, I don't. So it's a very interesting. I tell people, it's
We
like,
have
look,
very
we're
interesting
both
arguments.
NLP coaches. We're both bank certified trainers. She's a certified high performance coach. We have so many modalities that our fights are really interesting.
Oh, I bet.
And we don't get into it very often, but like when we do, it's like suddenly this like giant subconscious like.
Right. What limiting
Don't-
believe do you
Yes.
have, or do
So
I
battle.
have?
let's let's unpack this.
Right.
Battle is on.
That just drives him crazy. I'm like, let's unpack this belief, and he just hates
Wait,
that.
the word unpack
Yes, he
specifically.
hates
Let's
that.
unpack
He
this.
hates
He's like,
it.
ah.
these things that people say, and I'm
It's
just
a
like,
very
after a while, I'm
common
just like, really,
coaching
come on.
terminology of like,
Right.
well, let's unpack that, and he has a lot of resistance against that. Should we unpack that resistance that you have around that?
So one of the reasons I was on my phone before is because for all the listeners, I want to shout out what episodes you guys were both on.
Strong
because
work.
You're seeing both of them together, but I also want you to get to know them separately too, so that
Sure.
you can see the dynamic here. So I was telling Kevin after we left your house, Spike was nice enough to cook us steak dinner, which was amazing.
Yes.
That
And
is the
you
way
ate
to
all
my
our
heart,
cookies.
Spike. Number one, love language, words of affirmation. Number two is food. And the third one, Spike, you can't do for me. So, right.
Physical touch.
Right.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Physical touch. One of the questions I wanted to ask you too was, in that tough moment when she came to you and said she was attracted to someone else, a little bit of attraction, not anything great, but it's like that's a moment you guys need to be have candor. How did you not get triggered by that, Spike? So from a guy's standpoint, how did you not get all insecure and guy like?
Right. Well, this is the thing. See, you just said insecure and guy-like.
Right,
So
see.
guy-like is the way guys think they should act.
Right.
And I don't do that. I'm not a typical guy because most guys have an insecurity inside that limits them, that something happens and they react. And I don't have that. I mean, I've had it in the
You had
past.
it beat out
Right.
of you.
I had it
Practically.
beat out of me, basically. But that was the training that I went through. This is why I wrote the book, Food Game, A Man's Ultimate Recipe.
That was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. That is awesome.
So but that's how I did it. Hi, welcome to the Spike Spencer Show.
Oh man.
The whole concept of it, when she came to me, it's instead of going, okay, I'm scared,
Right.
I'm not. Because she knows that if anything happens and she were to, let's say, and we reject this, that she were to leave me or cheat on me or something, that's not about me, that's about her.
Right.
And you have to be strong enough in yourself to deal with that and be able to say, all right, well, it will hurt, sure, certainly, but I'll be damn straight, I am not that low of a secure feeling, man, that I have to react to that. When you react, then you're not in control of yourself.
Exactly.
So when she came to me with that, I was like, okay, let's talk. What is it? Rather than being defensive and saying, oh no, I'm upset by all this. It's like, okay, well, let's fix it.
Did you have a short moment of like the reaction and then you realized it and then stopped, or was it totally just a candor, like pleasant conversation?
It was,
I've struggled with this in the past, so I
wouldn't say
think
it was pleasant. I mean,
Well-
there was definitely, it was a courageous conversation for me because
Right.
I
Definitely.
love
And
him
I
so much,
respect
and
that.
I didn't want to hurt him,
Yeah.
but I also knew that I hadn't taken action on those feelings, so that like that's where the line is. You can feel whatever you want to feel,
Right.
But the line is for us is if you take action on it. Like
Okay.
there are some people whose line is, oh, you can't feel something for somebody else. Well, like you can't really restrict somebody's feelings.
Right, especially if it's organic.
Yeah,
and
like
yeah.
the feelings are just a sign of something that needs to be released. A feeling is just a guide. So because I didn't take action on those feelings, there was nothing for him to be defensive necessarily about, because we drew the line. We had a very candid conversation when we first got
Boundaries.
together about our boundaries, about specifically, because this was back like 7 years ago when we were acting, and I said, well, like what if I was in a movie What if
Right.
I had a movie and I had a love scene?
Right.
Like what are our boundaries around that? And he was like, I would be cheering you on, and
I'd be
and
on
like,
the outside of the camera.
like,
She
but-
likes it when you cup her butt.
and he would be saying, yeah, and he said between action and cut, that's I will cheer you on, but if after cut there's still something, then like
We're gonna have a long chat.
a long chat will ensue. So we just drew our boundaries early on. We got very specific because a lot of times people say, and I've had this in past relationships where they're like, I was cheated on, and and it sucked. That's not a boundary. That's if you've gotten cheated on, or
Little passive
like
aggressive.
it's a passive aggressive ask for the other person to not cheat, but you're not
Right.
actually saying what it is that's your boundary. So we got very crystal clear, like, what is cheating? Because having been in relationships with insecure men in the past, like I have, like some people, like my ex was not happy that I had so many men in my phone.
Right.
And that was a line that he was scared that I would cross. So that's something that, but I wasn't cheating. So looking at that, what is the line that you will tolerate? And for us, the line was on action. So will
Right.
I take that action? Did I act on those feelings? And no, I did not. So he
Right.
didn't have any action to get upset about or have his boundary. His boundary was not crossed.
And
We're
you knew
emotional
that
animals.
going into that conversation.
Yeah.
Because you had
We're-
had a previous, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're emotional animals. We're going to feel what we feel. That's their feelings. That's what happens. You can't always control those. You know, what you do with those feelings, you can control.
Right.
Yeah, you can.
Afterwards.
How do
Yeah.
you build that level of? I don't even know if it's confidence. So Taryn and I, my girlfriend and I, watched a documentary called "The Mask of Masculinity," and it was all about how we raise boys to be like, you don't talk about your feelings, you don't cry, you just deal with it. You're a man, and
Rub some dirt on it.
yeah, exactly. And
That's what I
how
grew up
that's affecting them later on in life when they can't, or they struggle to be vulnerable with a loved one because they've been taught not to, and they're called soft when they are.
Right.
Right. So how do you kind of make that identity shift from saying, like you just said, I'm not. You are a man, but not what people think is a man.
Right.
I feel the same way. I tell Alan that all the time. Like, I'm not your typical man. I don't want to be. I want to be extraordinary.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you make that shift? And what is a man actually?
The toxic masculinity aspect of it is a very large problem because people are committing suicide because of that.
Because they don't
Men
actually get
are-
help because they feel like they need to be this man and they shouldn't have problems. They shouldn't have feelings. But the thing is, you're fucking human.
Yeah.
And you
Exactly.
do.
Yeah, and things like the Mankind Project, Circle of Men, things of that nature are allowing men to actually express their feelings. I mean, we
I
cry.
think it's sexy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the thing.
I
that
love
guys
making him
don't
cry.
You said that at
You
dinner.
love making anybody cry.
No, I just like the depth of, and I don't mean that in like a bad way. Like it's not.
I know exactly what you
manipulative
mean
thing.
because you feel
I
like you
love-
grow through it.
When he saw me first in my wedding dress, when he looked at that Florentine steak on our honeymoon, when he held our baby for the first time, like those moments, like he is not a big crier, but when he gets like really choked up, like it permeates my heart and my soul, and I love it. I love the depth of feeling that he feels comfortable expressing with me. It's not like necessarily with everyone, but he feels comfortable and vulnerable enough. And I believe being vulnerable is being courageous. Like it is being courageous. It is saying, okay, shame, you've gotten a hold over me, and I'm
Right.
going to be vulnerable about this thing. I'm going to be courageous about this thing. And that's the shift.
Well, and there's a difference between true, real emotional release, honest communication, and the ugly crying. You know, like you just want a pageant. You know, it's like,
I ugly cry sometimes, though.
yeah,
Like, totally.
I mean, and that's fine. I'm
Full
not
on.
gonna lie, man. When my first marriage, when it went down the tubes, I mean, I was on the floor in my kitchen, you know, screaming at God and crying. I mean, I'm losing my mind because I lost everything, literally. And, you know, from that point, you have to build yourself up. And the reason why I'm able to do these things is because there's a self-worth that I have an agreement with myself that I said, you know what? I deserve this. I deserve an amazing woman. I deserve.
19 years
And when
his
you-
junior.
That's right. If you don't feel inside that you deserve something, then it's phony. You don't feel like you deserve it. That's when you sabotage your career.
How do you
or
get to the point
sabotage-
where you feel like you deserve it? Through hard
It's
work and earning
it's
it?
work and honesty.
Okay.
Because, when you're honest about, okay, I feel bad about A, B, C, whatever it is,
Right.
investigate. Ask questions. Ask yourself questions.
Unpack it.
Unpack it.
All right, for the listeners, I'm going to find that episode, so I'm not
Yeah,
in
no, it's
rapport
fine.
with
It's
you
fine.
guys. But
So it took time. It took a lot of failure, and a failure is not a failure if you learn something from it. And believe me, for 7 years, I was dating, and I was not in the best place. I dated amazing women, yes, but I was like, wow, I messed things up. I have shame behind some of those things, but I learned from each one of them. And I was also radically honest with all of them. Because there was that conversation that you have after you've been seeing somebody for a while intimately, and they're like, where's this going? I'm like, this is pretty much it.
Yeah.
This is me. This is who I am, where I am in my life right now, and you have to be able to be honest and open with that.
And then this girl came.
And then this sparked thing out of my life.
And
Changed
then-
all the plans.
It was done, man.
Yeah. And the thing is that
I had to be ready for her.
oh yeah.
That's the key.
Oh yeah.
I had to be ready for her, and I had to do the work on myself. And like I tell people, anybody I'm training, right off the bat, I say, start reading those self-help books, start reading about dating, start seeing the matrix. You have to understand relationships. You have to understand why she's saying what she's saying. Is she testing you? What's the game here? What's happening? Et cetera, et cetera. When you see it all and you put the clues together, you're like, oh, I get it.
right.
And you don't take it personally anymore. You go, oh, this is happening because I said this, she said this. Oh, okay.
Being hyper-conscious of relationships.
Being
And
hyper-conscious
raising
of
your
your
awareness.
Some would
Relationship.
say
Right.
hyper-conscious.
You know what I would say? Being hyper-conscious.
Hyper-conscious podcast.
That's what I would say.
So Spike's episode was number 132. If you want to get to know Spike Spencer better, and I'm going to find Kim's right now. It should have been ladies first. Why did I do Spike first?
If you go on YouTube and search Spencer, they'll both come up, and you'll have the episode.
Well, there you go.
I'm doing iTunes.
And I think you did need a lot of preparation and training to be able to handle all of this.
I did. I'm still working on it.
Still working on it.
Yes,
It's
this is a work in progress.
But-
you know?
But the thing is that I also loved about Spike from that first day that we met was his ownership of his story. And I know my episode with you guys was Own Your Story.
Yes.
Speaking of which, episode number 129, Owning Your Story
Strong
with
work.
Kimberly
There you go.
Spencer.
Strong work.
Fire episodes. Both of those are so good.
Yes.
So with Owning Your Story, like Spike was the first man that I had ever he shared his story of what he went through on the day that I met him. Not in great graphic detail, but to the extent of like, this is like ex-wife cheated on me, da-da-da-da-da. And he owned his part in that.
Right.
He owned the fact that he was more focused on business at that time than on the relationship. He owned how he shifted. He took responsibility for his part in the marriage, because there are two people in the marriage, and each of you have 100% responsibility for each of your actions.
Right.
And he took responsibility 100% for his actions. Now, he couldn't control what her actions were, but he took responsibility for his actions. And for me, that was the sexiest thing.
Right.
Because I think insecurity stems from us making excuses for and not taking ownership for the things that we need to take ownership of.
That's a really good quote.
We
right
gotta
there.
go. Oh, we do?
That was a good place to land, though. Like,
So just for the listeners, we're in an Airbnb, and Spike and Kim have to check out and go back home. Alan and I have to go to the airport at some point today, too. But
One day.
If you want to learn more about them, and I'll give you guys a chance to talk about what's going on, but listen to their episodes, because you'll get a deeper dive into who they are and their stories, which knowing their stories makes you appreciate and understand them at a deeper level. So make sure you check those out. What are you guys doing? Where can people find you? All of that happy jazz. This went by too fast.
Yeah, it did.
this went by like super fast.
Oh, yeah?
Crazy fast. We could have stayed here for another half an hour.
We could hang out a little. I mean, our baby's not here.
Baby is not here
It's up
yet.
to you.
Do we wanna
Yeah,
keep going?
we
They
can totally
come
go a
in
little
and then-
longer.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, we
for
can
it.
keep going.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
extend
go
it.
for it.
All we have to do is hit the camera again.
I'll do it after.
Oh,
She'll
okay.
go to another minute.
Okay, cool. One of the questions, so we watched The Greatest Showman together that
Yeah.
evening. And Kevin and I also, again, like you two are so clearly happy together and well connected. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you guys are communicating. I always say the suppression of self-expression leads to depression. And I think that not expressing yourself, your truth to each other corrodes the connection between you.
Absolutely.
You guys are obviously very well connected, and I think it's what you're doing in private that makes you seem so happy in public, which is so cool.
We're like this all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, we
this
really
is-
are. We will fight. We will have our discussions, but it's usually not. It's so illuminating when we do it. We're working on the small little things that are annoying that we're like, we can fix this, rather than
Right.
the fights that a lot of people have that are so huge. They're fighting, but they're not fixing.
Yeah,
Right.
they're fighting.
Can you give us an
constantly
example?
tweaking.
What's an example of a fight,
Ooh.
if you want?
a fight, but not fix?
No, so like maybe a little thing that you guys tweaked that made a big difference in your relationship in terms of boundaries, or maybe like, you know, something that Spike does that annoys
Well,
Kim.
one thing that we do is we'll ask each other, do you want me to help or do you want me to listen?
Oh, wow.
Is
Yeah.
that all you want?
Oh, word. Because
Because
I
sometimes-
just jumped right to that first one. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
So usually it's like that's what guys do. When I said that couch time,
Oh, yeah.
let her talk for 20 minutes and just sit there. Don't strap on your
Right.
utility belt and go fix it. You just listen.
It's
That's
hard.
what you need to do.
Yeah, it's hard.
Sometimes I need that as well. And she straps on her utility belt very rapidly.
right,
Starts
right.
coaching me, and
Let's
I'm like,
unpack this.
no, I don't need that right now. I'm expressing a feeling.
Like I said,
to be clear with
yeah,
Okay.
I think it also comes down to the energy of, like, because we all have both masculine and feminine energies within us.
Yes.
And I am the most feminine looking, masculine energied woman
Oh, yeah.
Right.
probably out there.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
super sparkly, super driven.
Right.
Like, and that drive also drives me to strap on my tool belt and like want to
Yeah.
fix things immediately and like get shit handled. So, and sometimes there is a process, and does come down to honoring his process as much as he honors mine.
How do you communicate that? Like,
I just tell her.
Yeah,
But-
we say we're in
well,
process.
but remember, you guys are layers deeper than a lot of people. A lot of people
Right.
have never gotten there, right? So how do you? What's the initial step in saying like,
Ask for the space.
okay,
yeah.
Ask for the space. Tell your significant other. You set your parameters before you get to that point
Right.
where you're fighting.
Right.
You say, if we're going to have a conversation, if we're going to have something deep, I need to ask for that space. And whenever I ask for that, I just say, I just need you to listen right now, okay? And you make that agreement, and you keep the agreement. You know, sometimes it's not easy to do.
Right.
You know, this is, like I said, it's a work in progress constantly. You're never going to stop working on your relationships.
Right.
And your self-worth and your confidence, etc. It is an ongoing process. So being open and honest about what you need prior to the emotional spike is better. You have to be able to come to grips and have an agreement prior.
What I find most interesting about what you just said, that's also true, but it's also predicated on your awareness of yourself.
100%.
All of this is
Yeah.
predicated on that. Because if you, when you said you need to communicate what you need, most people don't even know what they need.
Right.
They have no idea what their love languages are, or like I didn't.
Yeah.
In my
Right.
last relationship, if I had known what my love languages were, I could have communicated effectively, like why I don't feel good.
We had that, for example, the love languages is a great thing because we had that disparity, would you call it? Like that I was speaking French, he was speaking English.
Yeah.
Oh
idea,
yeah,
because his love language is acts of service. Mine is words of affirmation and physical touch. That's why you and I are like
twins.
twins.
This
like
is the
total
female
twins.
version of Alan
Like,
Lazarus, just so you know.
twins, because that is that words of affirmation. Like he cooks for me. He does the dishes, and when I would do the dishes, like I expect praise.
She'll clean one dish, and I'm supposed to throw a parade.
Maybe
And-
not
and-
expect, but like hope for, right?
No,
Subconsciously.
I expect it.
All right.
But that's my love language. And so if I'm not receiving words of affirmation
Right.
for the things that I'm doing that are of service or in service of him,
Mm.
then we had to have a conversation about that, because he's like, what? It's the dishes. Like, oh, you built my website. Like, oh, it's you.
But that's
you just
automatic
did what
for
you did.
him.
It's
Those
automatic
things
for
are
him
automatic for him,
service.
right.
But for me, like words of affirmation is mine. So he literally, I ask him every single day, why do you love me today? And I want a specific reason, because I need that word of affirmation. And it's not a test. It's I want to make sure that I am receiving those words of affirmation so that we stay on point. The same is true with physical touch. Like both he and I are very high with. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and on my end, it's somewhat difficult for me to deal with that when she says, why do you love me today? Something because I'm in the bank code. I'm high knowledge as well,
Right.
And that knowledge aspect is like take knowledge and my acts of service. I'm like, well, I told you a long time ago. I tell you all the time. It's like, why do I have to keep telling you something? It's like a test to me. And
he feels like it's a test.
It feels
but
like a
it's
test
not
sometimes.
A test.
I have to be self-aware enough to go,
Right.
okay, she's not testing you. She wants to know. And then I got to think of something.
So many people end up in the relationship. It's like we always talk about this. If you end up in a relationship by accident, you're there has to be some form of work that goes into it. And I think a lot of people are just like, it just should work.
And we had in the beginning, we had, it did like work. We just worked really well. But as you evolve, as you grow, you're gonna want to explore more tools. You're gonna want to explore more resources because we were doing good, and then like 2 years ago or so, when we found the bank code system, I was having a little bit of annoyance with his process of he would dive right into something and then he would get stuck in analysis paralysis. And I was like, well, dude, like just do it, right?
But taking action for you is easier than
Taking
her.
action for me.
that, than him,
And,
sorry.
and through, that, through the bank code personality system, which we can give you a link to in the description, that personality system, it taught me, okay, now I know his decision-making process. His
Right.
decision-making process literally is leap in and then try, like, every single step he has to figure out the how before he moves forward to another leap.
I see
Right.
the opportunity, I know it, and then I've got to break it all down.
And then,
Right.
And that sometimes
and
it
sometimes
gets mired up in that.
sometimes it gets lost.
I'm more like him. Just go in it all in and figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
Whereas it's
I'm like you,
interesting.
Spike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
figure
that-
out, see,
that
well, in the,
K
in the others,
gets you a little tripped up.
If the knowledge, the K is higher than the A, I put it this way. It's real simple. It's the AK. Action is jumps out of the plane,
Right.
and then has to read all the instructions about how the parachute works, and he's figured, it's made of this, it does this, it's a...
Right.
And the knowledge action, the knowledge gets up in the plane and needs to know everything about the plane, about all
Right.
the stuff, and he finally makes the decision to jump. The plane's already landed, and he just jumps on the ground.
That's a great. So we often say one, and that's why the whole is greater than the sum of the parts with you two. I just had this breakthrough. One is ready, fire, aim,
Yeah.
and the other one is ready, aim.
Ready,
And sometimes
aim,
it's
but
just
very,
fire,
very
ready,
rarely
aim.
fine.
Right.
Yeah.
But together, you guys are ready, aim, fire.
We work it out. I mean, it's there's so many different levels. Like this, when I talked about the relationship sales dynamics, it's when you speak all the languages that you can. Like, what is your NLP strategies? What are the representational systems? What's the bank codes that you have? What is your love language? What's your Enneagram? I mean, there's all these different things. Once you put them all together, you can see.
Right.
You can
why
see the
you
other
make
person's
decisions.
matrix,
You can see
yeah.
why they make decisions. You put that together, and you've got this incredible matrix of information.
And you two know each other's fully and
yeah.
appreciate each other.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
he's an Enneagram 3, and the base negative emotion for that is shame. And so
Right.
when he's not, in his mind, providing at the level that he wants to or he thinks he should be, then that creates massive shame. For me, my base as an 8, like I'm really good at challenging, which makes me very good at my job.
Right.
At the same time, like my base negative emotion is anger. So like my default in a fight is I immediately like I'm ready. And so I know that for him, like early on, and this was even before we had that knowledge of the different types of personality systems and things like that.
Right.
I just always knew I need to back away from the situation
Right. Take a
before I
minute.
explode. And so he's been the only man I've ever been with that has allowed me to have that permission to take that space.
Right.
Yeah, she needs it. She gets it. She just got to ask me.
Yeah, and I'm
You
like,
know.
and I can feel myself if we're in, like, we've only been in probably 7, 8 heated, like really heated arguments.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
many. It's 7 years.
in 7
I mean,
years,
you know.
and that he and pretty much every time it got heated was because I didn't ask for that space. And to touch on asking, a lot of times, especially for women, but also for men, when we don't ask for what we want, it's because we don't feel like we're enough. We're not capable enough to solve it ourselves. We don't feel smart enough to figure it out. And that lack of belief in ourselves that we are and that we are not enough, that limiting belief, that prevents us from actually asking for the support, asking for the space, asking for the things that we need. Yeah. And there's the baby coming in.
I need to hit one thing real fast.
You come in.
Go ahead and come on in.
Come on in. You'll get to see our baby. Hi. And my mom.
Hey, buddy. Come here.
Our first child on the
Hyperconscious podcast. This is the first guest appearance. This is Declan.
Appearance of Declan.
Shout out, little dude.
What's up, man?
I know. I got it.
All right. This is our fella.
So
Hello,
nice.
guys.
You wanted to add something, Spike?
But yeah, I wanted to add something because when she had said, the Enneagram 3 is shame, and that's that kind of ticked something off for the guys who were listening, who would say, you know what, I'm not going to go with that. I'm not going to, you don't want to be shamed. You don't want somebody to know, I feel shame about A, B, or C, whatever that is.
Especially lack of providing.
The man goes like, and then you're going to fight.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm not going to talk about that. The knowledge takes away a lot of that. When you know, it's like Enneagram 3, that's going to go back to shame. You go, okay, well, let's investigate that. What am I ashamed of? Do I need to be? Let's figure that out. Because when she says that, a lot of guys go straight to defense.
Right.
I know a lot of guys who are listening were like, I'm ashamed.
Yeah.
And I'll own it. I'll go, okay, I feel shame about something. Let me go back and look at that. The knowledge gives you an out.
And as we learned this past weekend, like the number one thing that women mostly feel shame about is their body.
Body image,
The number one thing that men mostly feel shame about, exactly, Declan. It's money.
Yeah, 100%.
It's money. It's being a provider. It's being in that role,
and
especially in a committed relationship when you have a family. And if you're in a relationship,
Careful.
if you're in a relationship with an Enneagram 3, 2, 3s, and 4s, that's the base.
That we can get into this for a long
Yeah,
time.
we're gonna have
We're
to have to do another one for. I like the in person. The in person is so much.
Yeah.
It's different.
You guys just need to
come
come
to
to California
Boston.
more.
Yeah,
Come to
maybe
Boston.
Come to Boston.
Come to Boston.
Right.
Yeah, come to
I'm happy to
Boston.
come to Boston.
Yeah.
I've been there. We've been there.
We'll have
Boston's
to.
awesome.
We'll set it up, and I'm already looking forward to our next mastermind call because it's different when you hug somebody and hold them up and drink whiskey with them.
Right.
That's true. That is true.
Anything else in closing?
For all the listeners, again, had I had the awareness, I think awareness is everything. You can only make good decisions based on your level of awareness in a given arena. And when it comes to relationships and knowing yourself, it's very clear that you two's relationship is wonderful because of your self-awareness and your awareness of each other, and most importantly, your appreciation of each other. So you have helped me set a new standard for what I want my next relationship to be.
Also have respect for the relationship.
Right.
If you respect the relationship, then you're going to work on it.
Yeah.
Can I ask you both a question real quick? What is your relationship to you in terms of is it number 1? Is it number 1A? Is it number 2? Like if you had to rate everything, where is your relationship in importance?
I'm going to go with 1. I mean, this relationship is everything. This is our parenting this little guy. This is our business success. Because, when we had talked about this before, 50% of all marriages are ending and 50% of all businesses, according to the SBA, end in 5 years.
Right.
There's a connection.
There's a connection, yeah.
Because that's the number one reason why businesses fail is divorce and relationships.
And I also think to touch on that and explore that just a little more.
Here, go see grandma. Go see grandma.
Is that I think it's really a tie in many ways with yourself, your relationship that you have with yourself. Because if I am not my highest and best self, I'm not bringing that to our relationship, which is the foundation of our family. And if you want to see a business tank, get in a bad relationship. When a relationship starts to tank, like one that you are really in, like that is one of the quickest ways to destroy productivity.
Right. I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Oh, and
Twins.
Yeah, twins, for sure.
Plus, also, if both of you are not striving to be better, one of you is going to stay here, and the other one's going to keep going, and that is not going to work.
That rubber band will eventually snap.
It will snap.
Yeah, I've seen
That's
that
what happens
happen.
most of the time. This is why guys have that situation where they're like, "Oh no, I'm good. She's happy, everything's fine," and she's next to him going, "Help him, help
Yeah.
him.
Right.
And he's seen this,
I've seen this.
internationally.
I've-
Internationally, in his Don't Kill Your Date panel, like when he has couples, married couples, and they'll come up to us and they'll be like, "What do I do?" Like he's just like he's not growing, he's not passionate because nothing is sexier than passion. So find something that you're passionate about, and that passion will ripple into your relationship.
And it doesn't have to be the same thing that you're passionate
Yeah.
about.
I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
he's passionate about real estate. That's not really my jam, but
I go
like
sailing. I love it.
he loves sailing. Like I'm very passionate about running marathons. Like he is passionate about sipping wine and sitting on the sidelines and cheering me on.
Well, and be passionate about your relationship. If you're not passionate about your relationship, try to find out why not, or find something that you are passionate about, because
Well, and
it is far
sometimes
better.
also, and it's a hard thing. Sometimes you're not with the right person.
Right.
True.
Right.
100%. Like sometimes it's really, you are with the person though who is a very much a representation of your subconscious mind.
Right.
And that's we can
Yeah, we're
And
gonna
what-
have to
that's
jump
another
into
that's
that.
episode,
a
but
whole
it's-
other
Right.
episode.
It's the mirror.
Cliffhanger.
It's 100% a mirror. Like, and that when you
That's right.
is that funny, Declan? when you are in that relationship, that intimate relationship, you are getting exposed to all the things about you. Like when I was in my past relationships with insecure men, it was only because I was so deeply insecure with myself, with what I wanted, with stating what I wanted, and by the time I got to this guy, like I needed to prepare for this guy too, because damn.
How you doing?
You can't look at me like that. This, like, there's a big. We gotta.
Well then, have a good one.
Spike might take his tooth out.
That's the whole moment. That's the whole moment.
I had a young man say to me one time, I don't know what I'm afraid of right now. I want to fear chase, but I don't know what I'm afraid of. I said, go fall in love.
Oh wow, strong.
Because
good
nothing will force you to face yourself more than being wholeheartedly in love with
Absolutely. Yeah.
someone, because that is the most challenging arena in the world, and you guys are doing wonderful at
It
it.
is true.
Spike, can you give us your best voice before we go?
Well, y'all, I hope you had a good time with us, because, girls like this. Talk like this, fellas.
If you're gonna end a relationship segment on the Hyperconscious podcast, I think you really got to end it with Jason Statham.
Right, so, it's great that you guys came to, watch our show. Dig the Hyperconscious podcast. These fellas here. That's right, mate. That's right. So, have a good day and all.
And I think Declan should end this one. Declan, would you like to come here and say something?
Go say hi.
I love it. I was hoping you were gonna
This
do
is
that.
the best.
Jackie,
He's like, I don't know.
Let's do
So you
it.
ready for showbiz?
can you say we're gonna hit the road? What are we gonna do? And then can you say bye? And can you say thank you?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not even gonna say goodbye. We'll let Declan do it. Have a good one.
Talk soon.
Say bye.